Hello, my name's Bev and I'm the author of the book Please Eat, A Mother's Struggle to Free Her Teenage Son from Anorexia, which describes our family's battle with the deadly eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, which my teenage son Ben developed back in 2009. Welcome to Chapter 7, which is called Consumed. I print out a pile of information that I'm convinced will scare the pants off Ben and stop him driving himself down this destructive path. Listen to what this woman writes, I say to him. Her anorexia is so bad she's in a wheelchair and her internal organs are in shreds. I remind him that this is what eating disorders can do if you take them too far. I pray it's gone in and will make Ben see sense. I still can't get my head around why, even when faced with the destructive consequences, even when faced with the undisputable evidence that this kind of behaviour doesn't make you more popular or attractive, Ben doesn't seem to want to do anything about it. Or is it that he can't do anything about it? I get angry, not in front of Ben, but when I'm alone, impotently so, because I know the anger won't achieve anything. I thump the table, I kick things, I scream and shout. For the first time I'm experiencing the anger and frustration that has no solution, or at least no obvious solution. I feel like someone who's been thrown into a dungeon from which there's no escape. The human instinct with a problem, even a monumental problem, is to find a solution and work towards it. Or at least that's my own personal instinct. But all you can do is attempt to scale the slimy walls, knowing that you're just going to slide back down again into the darkness. I feel helpless and hopeless. The various helplines I stumble across don't seem to offer much help other than emphasising the importance of getting your child treated as soon as possible. The first-person accounts I send off for don't have happy endings because the author never truly recovers. At the end of the book, they're still starving themselves, self-harming, or whatever destructive behaviour is driving them. Apart from hoping our CAMS appointment arrives in the post very soon, there's very little I can do. If I try to talk it through with Ben, he just blanks me or bites my head off. It's as if he's lost all his logic and rational thinking. My head is thumping. I wish to hell I could be doing something to stop the rot. Something, anything. I reach for a glass of wine. As my panic rises, I even try visiting the local church in an attempt to find emotional support. I read about miracles in the Bible and wonder why on earth Ben can't be miraculously healed too. I feel as if I'm praying and pleading to a God that doesn't exist. And despite being sympathetic, no one in the church really gets it. No one has any idea of the agony I'm going through and how I'm beginning to fear for my child's life. The thought strikes me that I'm arriving home from church more depressed than when I set off. That can't be right. Watching your child descend into anorexia is excruciating. Many a time I wish there was a magic pill he could take and, hey presto, the old Ben would be back. Unlike a physical illness, you can't take medication to cure it. You can't have an operation to cut it out. Worse, the wonderful, level-headed, intelligent child you've spent all these years rearing has undergone a dramatic transformation into a volatile stranger whose very sanity seems to have gone absent without leave. You feel angry. Can't he see what he's doing to himself and us? You feel frightened. How long will this last? Will we ever get our boy back? You feel frantic. What damage is this doing to his body? Could something tip the balance and lead to him taking his own life? The dreaded S word that we never mention and daren't even think about. You feel preoccupied. You can't think of anything but anorexia and what it's doing to your child. You feel jealous. Why is everyone else's child okay and mine isn't? You feel guilty. Is it something we've done as parents? Should we have picked up on it sooner? Anorexia also makes you feel very isolated. and it's so difficult to talk to a layperson about it. To the outside world, it's such a little known, much misunderstood and even taboo condition. Living with anorexia is like living in a surreal world, a world where you pretend that everything is just fine, when in reality you are falling off a cliff. I have a chat with my sister Alison, who has another Google around to see what she can find. She sends me a few links, including one to a book called Boys Get Anorexia Too by Jenny Langley, which I immediately send off for. When it arrives, I can't put it down. For the first time, I'm reading about a teenage boy who, much like Ben, developed anorexia. Also, just like Ben, he's into sport. Page after page, I feel like shouting, "Me too," as I recognise the signs, symptoms and experiences. Jenny could be describing our family. Finally, I found someone else who has been through this nightmare. To keep my spirits up, I keep going back to the end of Jenny's book, the bits where her son recovers, goes to university and begins to lead a normal life. If her family can do it, then so can we. We have no idea how we'll do it, mind you, but we'll damn well do it. I feel a little more optimistic, especially with the CAMS referral underway, when we eventually hear from them, that is. Another meltdown and another quiet session on the sofa afterwards. Ben leans his head on my shoulder, silently sobbing with despair as I tighten my grip around his shoulders, as if I can fill him with some kind of healing force, if only. "Mum, I feel so trapped," he cries out. I can hear the desperation in his voice as he reaches out to me for help. "It's not going as I planned. It's not turning out how I thought it would." The seductive singing of the anorexia sirens has lured an unsuspecting Ben onto the rocks, and he can't stop himself from sinking. He whispers that he just doesn't have the strength to get out of it alone. I stroke his damp, matted hair and promise to do everything in my power to help. But what can I do, other than share cautionary tales about what anorexia could do to him and insist that he must fight back? Damn that CAMS appointment. When will it arrive? Ben was to tell me much later that by this point his life had become little more than input and output. I thought about food and exercise all the time. I couldn't focus on anything else. Not schoolwork, not social life, not hobbies, not anything. I couldn't even have fun, because that would be wasted time when I could be exercising. I was incredibly lonely, and ironically, the only thing that took my mind off this new loneliness was thinking about food and exercising. It was a vicious circle. By mid-November, it's as if the old Ben has been completely consumed. What is left is someone we don't recognise. Physically, he's lost 1/4 of his body weight. Mentally, he's gone off the rails. By now I know a fair bit about the effects that starvation has on the body, but what I never get used to is a distressing behaviour, or the way that, just when you think you're seeing a chink of light at the end of the tunnel, kapow, you're back to square one, fighting the demon. The revolving doors just go round and round. Also, when you think that your child has reached their lowest point, something happens that drags them even deeper. I always thought that anorexia was just about eating, or rather not eating, but I'm rapidly discovering that it's about so much more. I beg, I plead, I prove to Ben that I can eat mountains of food without batting an eyelid, and that if I can do it, so can he. Look, half a packet of biscuits, a whole box of chocolates. See, it doesn't bother me one jot. And you know me, always on a diet, hey? I attempt a little laugh, as if this was normal, everyday me. Oh, how relaxed I am around food, and how much I can eat without putting on an ounce of weight. I cry, I weep, I shout, I scream, I negotiate, but I just can't get through. He won't listen. He can't listen. I am so desperate that I decide the only way I can communicate with Ben is to write him a letter. A part of me still believes that somehow we can snap him out of this, that he will suddenly see sense and stop this destructive behaviour. The problem is, I have no idea how. Maybe a letter will work. Maybe when he reads how terrified and upset we are, he will come to his senses and stop. Maybe, just maybe. So one afternoon, while waiting in the car for Ben to finish school, I carefully put pen to paper. Dear Ben, please read this letter. Hopefully by putting it down on paper, I can get everything across without either of us getting upset or shouting at each other. Anorexia is dangerous and it needs to be stopped right now before it gets any worse. Getting back to a normal way of eating may take time and it probably won't be easy, but however long it takes and no matter how hard it may seem, we want you to know that we'll be right behind you. Your happiness and health are our number one priority. Your dad and I want you to know that we will always be there for you, no matter how sad you feel, and we will get the very best help for you. You know the value of healthy eating and all the reasons why you need to eat the right stuff, and enough of the right stuff for a growing boy. This means you're much more likely to understand the massive damage that this could do to your body if the anorexia gets any worse. We love you too much to watch this happen, which is why, as your loving parents, we need to step in and say, stop, enough is enough. We will make serious promises to you as our dearest son, if you make serious promises to us and keep them. You are more important to us than you could possibly ever imagine or even know. Please don't think there is no solution, because there is, very much so. But meanwhile, any time you feel sad or you feel it's too hard, please just talk to us about anything. Don't bottle it up, and let us all start thinking positively now, even if that may at first, or even seconds, seem hard. It's not just you that's doing this alone, it's all three of us, our strong family unit. Again, I can't emphasize how much we love you, and we will be with you all the way through this. Big hugs times 10 million, and even more. Mum and Dad. I read it to Ben, who listens in silence. I get the impression he wants to take action, but something tells me it's already too late. By the end of November, we are all being dragged downstream so fast we can barely think. The outbursts have become more frequent, often several times a day. Vicious, destructive outbursts with loud screaming and tearful hysterics. It's as if Ben is having a complete mental breakdown. In 2012, when I'm writing the draft for this book, I asked Ben to tell me more about this period. I realised there was a problem, he says. I knew I needed help, but I didn't like to admit it. But to be honest, I didn't think the need was that urgent. I knew I wasn't feeling good mentally, but I was happy with my body. I didn't think it would get any worse. Being thin meant I didn't have to worry about getting fat. Yes, I felt weak and generally unwell, but I just assumed it was part of being a teenager. But I admit I was worried about all the fuss I was creating. He explains that he took photographs of himself back then, which I'd never told you about and would rather not show you. He goes on to say, I was almost in awe at how thin I'd become, yet at the same time I was terribly sad at how bad it had got. I couldn't quite believe it. But I remember looking at those photos and thinking, this is as far as I'm going to allow myself to go. I have a photograph of Ben which is taken in late November 2009. I've always taken lots of photos of Ben, but as he gets thinner, I find it too painful. As a result, this photo is one of the few I take at this stage. Ben has a big skull, and in this photo it looks out of proportion with his body. The muscles and flesh on his arms and legs have disappeared, and instead of being well-rounded and shapely, his calves are straight. To be honest, he looks half dead. By this time, his skeletal framework is becoming more and more pronounced. Standing in his underpants, I can see his shoulder blades sticking out. His hip bones and his overlarge knee joints look like the kind of thing you might see on a third world famine report. His vertebrae stand out in angry bumps down his back, red raw from umpteen sit-ups as the bones rub against the fleshless skin. The first time I see him walking around like this, I feel physically sick. Remember when those underpants were tight? Now they hang off him, wafting around his bony thighs and sitting loosely on his protruding hip bones. But he can't see any of this. All he sees is fat. His skin is dry, especially around the finger joints where it's red and itchy. His increasingly blank face has black rings around the eyes, and all the fun and zest for life has been stripped from his expression. Yet night after night he'll sit on the sofa rolling up his shirt to pinch the rolls of fat on his abs and prodding his new double chin. We wait and wait to hear from CAMS. I call the GP's surgery to see if they know how long it will be. Can anything be done to speed it up? No? Are you sure? Then, on December the 1st, a letter arrives in an official NHS envelope. I can hardly contain my excitement as I rip open the envelope and unfold the letter inside. That's the end of chapter 7. You can move on to chapter 8, which is called Bombshell. If you click the in-video link, which is at the end of this video. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in chapter 8. It would also be really good if you could like this video, and you can subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe button below. Oh, and don't forget to visit my blog. You'll find the link below. You'll also find a link to my website where you can download PDFs of my blog for free.